Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Qualified Immunity. We're two people with almost a decade of experience working with inside the legal system. Attempt to at least discuss the problems in our system, and then attempt to make America sane again. My name is Greg Engel. My co-host's name is the wonderful Lucas Cohen. Lucas, say hi to the people.
Hi, everybody.
Today we're going to talk about a very, very sensitive subject. With that being said, this is your trigger warning, I guess. If you read the title of this podcast, this episode is called The Pedo Pandemic. And with that being said, I want to make sure before we dig into this that everybody understands what we're talking about today. Like this is not something to be taken lightly. It is not something that should be stuffed under the rug, and it's something that has to get talked about. That being said, if somehow mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or even physically, this conversation, this topic is going to have an adverse reaction to anybody who would listen to this show, skip this episode. Skip it. It's not that I don't want you here, but I do not intend to cause harm on anybody by being here. That being said, I'm going to give about 10 seconds before we start this, because this is a difficult issue to begin with.
Yeah.
So, I have made my warnings the best that I can. And with that being said, let's go. The pedo pandemic, the pedophilia pandemic, which will also directly tie into the trafficking pandemic that is not just beholden to America, it is beholden to the entire world. Obviously, they didn't create the Taken movies and they didn't happen in LA. So, in the last couple of years, there's been a lot of conversation about this, and there's been a lot of talk, especially, and you're a Boy Scout, especially since the Boy Scout thing happened, especially, I'm a confirmed Catholic, especially since the Catholic thing happened. There's been a lot of mainstream press that has highlighted the pedophilia, and I wouldn't even, it's epidemic, pandemic, crisis that we have in this country.
Well, and it's been especially highlighted in politics lately because of Ghislaine Maxwell and Jeffrey Epstein and their connections to various politicians and other.
And we could easily go down some twisted rabbit hole, and I don't want to go there because there's a lot of. And number one thing people are going to bring up is Pizzagate.
Yeah.
And there's no proof. Sorry, there's not. I haven't seen any proof. And that entire conspiracy theory ended up spinning somebody out to the point of trying to inflict bodily harm with no evidence. With that being said, there's plenty of pedophilia and there's plenty of sexual abuse that goes on with minors, and it's not just a girl topic. It's not just something that females go through. As we saw in the Boy Scouts and as we saw in the Catholic Church, this is an entire problem that we have to start talking about, and honestly having some very harsh corrective actions to it.
Yeah.
Because you are not only, and we can debate morality all day long, but you and I have said from day one, murder and rape should always be illegal.
Yeah.
No matter our libertarian tendencies, no matter our libertarian views, murder and rape should always be legal. Or illegal, illegal.
Well, and there's been a lot of, I've seen a lot of criticism of the libertarian movement. Oh, well, they think that is it statutory rape or pedophilia should be legal.
And the problem is there's a bunch of people inside that movement. And it's just like the LGBTQ movement. I believe in LGBTQ rights. Right. I have, it's one of those, they deserve the same right as every other human being and individual out there. Their sexuality, their preferences of who they decide they want to have consensual sexual relationships with, as long as they're adults,
Right.
should never be questioned. But there's a fraction within that movement now
Right.
that is, there was a court case in the last couple weeks.
Yeah, I think it was in the last 2 weeks.
That a convicted sex offender. Well, you can explain it better than I can.
Well, I'm trying to remember exactly what the case was about. Which one are you talking about specifically?
The one that he ended up winning the appeal. That said, he was out of Jersey.
I was going to say, was it like New York or
it was Jersey?
Was it New Jersey?
And he ended up appealing, saying it violated his rights because
of his sexual orientation.
Yes, because his sexual orientation was to those adolescents, which, well, we're going to try and get through this without me saying tons of swear words and being wholly over emotional about it, because nobody has the right to sexualize children. And I think this is where Democrats and Republicans, lefts, conservatives, whatever you want to put, whatever label you want to put on it, where at a certain age, children that are coming into adolescence and starting to learn about their body and things start changing need to know and learn what's happening.
Right.
Because in the absence of sex education, kids are more likely to be taken advantage of.
Right. And that's exactly what I was going to say was they're ripe for being taken advantage of, which is obviously a problem. If they're not being educated on what's going on, how to protect themselves,
then how do you protect them?
Right.
And this goes back to something of the problem becomes, don't sexualize them.
Yeah.
And there's a fine line in there. There's a super fine line in there, because we want kids to know what's going on, but at the same time, understanding and knowledge of what is going on versus promoting engagement is a draft. Because I mean, you went to a smaller public school than I did, or smaller school than I did. We had sex education in some aspects starting in the 5th grade.
Yeah, I think, well, I went to a public elementary school, and I think in 5th or 6th grade we had basically the talk.
Yeah, it was basically society saying, oh, well, we're going to have the talk now.
Yeah, they crammed like 40 of us in a room, and most of it was about puberty. They did tell us about a little bit about sex.
And that's the thing is children coming into adolescence have to understand what is happening in their body.
Right.
Otherwise, you leave them vulnerable to attack. And there's a statistic that somewhere between 1 in 3 and 1 in 4 minors will be sexually assaulted before they reach the age of 18. Which we can have a whole nother conversation one day of, are you actually an adult at 18?
Right.
Because and a lot of people in the movement that you see, and this is where we're going to get real controversial right now. In other cultures, once you hit puberty and are able to either bear a child, or make a child, that is considered adulthood. Now, within studies and psychology, we know and understand that your frontal cortex of your brain is not fully formed till at least about 23. Women get there faster than men do. Most men's frontal cortexes are not formed until 25 or later.
I was going to say, there's some research lately that suggests that that's not entirely accurate, that it is quite a bit later than that. Actually.
Yeah, that you are not a true, I don't want to say fully functioning, but you're not a true adult until you're in your mid-20s.
Yeah.
So the physical aspect of, are you an adult in certain cultures versus what is known psychology of, are you mentally an adult? Are you a fully formed and functioning human being? Is drastically different. And there is a bunch of people out there who for some reason, and it's grotesque to talk about, but for some reason, there are people out there who want to have sexual relationships with 12, 13, 14, and younger. There's plenty of people out there that we can pull up. I mean, the stories from the Epstein ordeal is as young as diapers.
Yeah. I mean, there are people in this state that are put on trial for raping babies. I mean, toddlers.
Well,
we're not talking about like 15-year-olds.
We're talking about 15-month-olds.
Yeah.
Like we're talking about an entirely different aspect. And the problem becomes other precedent now, especially in Oklahoma, has been made out of a rape case.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know this, there was some massive precedent. I think we even covered it on here a little bit, but there was some massive precedent made 3 weeks ago.
You're talking about the Native American.
Yeah, the Native American land,
the reservations,
and everybody was all yay. You know, the Supreme Court finally said Native American lands are sovereign. The part you missed about that was the entire appeals process was based off of a case where somebody had raped, I want to say it was a 3-year-old.
I think it was a 3 or a 4-year-old, yeah.
The entire precedent that got set of, yes, it's native land, just let a rapist out of prison. So at what point do you look up and you're like, hold the fuck on? Because we're talking about something that is highly debated in psychology of can it be fixed? Pedophilia is considered a mental health disorder. Now, can it be fixed? I don't know. Is there a problem? Yes. And there's story after story after story. Massive pedophile ring busted, 230 kids saved. That was on NBC. Boy Scouts have a pedophile epidemic and are hiding hundreds in its ranks, lawyers claim. August 6, 2019. You can keep going and going and going, and you can find child sex abuse stories all day long. There is a culture, and the problem becomes child sex abuse also leads into the human trafficking culture. And the human trafficking culture in this country, it's almost impossible to stop.
Yeah. Well, and we haven't even touched on like social media. Like there's a whole community on social media.
Like everybody went nuts about the Wayfair thing. That's been happening for at least a decade.
Well, and Wayfair is just the tip of the iceberg, more or less. I mean, Facebook, Instagram, there are whole pages, whole communities, whole groups where it's just this. I mean, it's just...
And they hide well.
Yeah.
They hide well.
They do.
And its entire community, like everybody's worried about militias and right-wing anarchists and this and that. But they hide well. Which turns into quit worrying about all the people with the guns and start worrying about the people raping children.
Yeah. Well, and part of this, man. So I was involved in some groups a couple weeks ago before I got banned from Facebook that were involved with like, and I don't know how people feel about this, doxing people that were...
Finding them.
Yeah.
Finding them.
Finding and doxing and reporting to the authorities pedophiles. So, and what happened was I was in one of those groups, the group got banned, and my account got banned with it.
Well, and then this is the part I don't understand. How is it still a controversial topic for most of America? I'll say most of America. To say, hey, wanting to rape kids is bad, okay?
I don't understand how people
justify that. Well, and here's the problem. I have 2 children.
Yeah.
I don't want to put my children in public schools. I don't want to put my children in a church. I don't want to put my children in Boy Scouts. I don't want to put my children in anything like that because who knows? And I was never sexually assaulted as a child. But that being said, I've been sexually assaulted as an adult. But I spent a lot of time in church clubs and sports clubs and sanctioned things growing up.
Right.
I mean, there were nights at church where we were there, we got there at 3 p.m. and we didn't leave till midnight.
Yeah.
setting stuff up, taking stuff down. Yeah, I mean, because it was before the days of multi-million-dollar youth buildings.
Yeah.
But I remember those days. It was one of those. One of the pastors at the time, it wasn't a minor, but ended up getting arrested for propositioning
Right.
in Oklahoma City, and I never saw it coming. And then I had to, I had spent a lot of time with this guy.
Yeah.
And I had to go through the gambit of questions. Well, did he ever try, from parents and pastors and no, nothing, nothing was ever tried.
Right.
I was also a very outspoken antagonizer.
You?
No, I know, right? Me, never. But I was different. If somebody would have done that to me, I would have said something.
Yeah.
Versus we've talked about my wife. My wife is a very quiet, very reserved person.
Yeah.
And from the cases I've seen, you don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Until after it's happening. And there's signs along the way, and you're just like, and now the problem becomes everything I see is, oh, well, they started wetting the bed again.
Yeah, I see that a lot with usually with toddlers they know not to do that. They know how not to do that.
Exactly.
And all of a sudden it starts again.
But it could be something totally different. But the second I see that now,
yeah,
I'm like, who have they been around?
Yeah.
And that's an awful question to have to ask.
But it's worth asking.
But because parents don't want to see that.
Yeah.
Because there's a statistic, and I'm going to screw it up, but I want to believe it's 80 to 90% of people who are raped or sexually assaulted, it's done by somebody close to them.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I've worked on a few cases where it was complicated, and we weren't actually working for who I think was guilty, but in the legal field, I mean, I've worked on cases where there was an accusation of child molestation.
Yeah.
And I've seen this more than once. It seems like there's a lot of gift exchange too.
Oh yeah,
which is pretty weird.
A lot of pedophiles pay their victims,
and it's kind of hard to tell if they were giving gifts to the children or to the parents, which just makes it really weird because it's almost like you're buying trust.
You are, in a sense. I mean, that is very much what's happening in a sense. The problem becomes, though, nobody ever looks up and is like, oh, well, why are they buying the trust?
Right. Why did they buy a new pony for this person?
And there's a lot of times it's family members.
Yeah.
I've also
seen that.
There's a whole segment of, we could go try and tackle human trafficking all day long. There's a way to do that, and most people aren't going to agree with it. Oh my God, I can't start legalizing prostitution. There's still going to be trafficking because what most traffickers do is they'll get a runaway.
Yeah.
Boy or girl, doesn't matter. They'll get a runaway, and they'll say, hey, I'll help you get out of town. I'll help you do this, because a lot of times it's an emotional teenager that got in a fight with mom and dad, and they get them on, hooked on something.
Yeah.
Figure out what it is, something. And then that turns into, they control them, they own them, and there's violence involved, and there's other things involved. Human trafficking can be taken care of if people want to devote the time and the resource to it. The problem becomes within human trafficking cases, it is a very, very high threshold to prove human trafficking. Yeah. Because there are three things: force, fear, or coercion. Those are the big three things in trafficking. Mm-hmm. Because most prostitutes nowadays, most escorts nowadays, in all honesty, are trafficked. Most pimp to prostitute relationships are out of force, fear, or coercion. Now, get somebody to prosecute that? Because this is the problem with the legal system right now. And I don't know if we've ever hit on this, but I'm going to now, because I think it needs to be said. They care about conviction rates. They don't care about justice.
Yeah. Well, I've said that for a long time, working in criminal defense.
Yeah.
They don't care about justice.
No, they care about the conviction rate. And the problem becomes with that is, Are you going to take something to trial and try and force or try and prove beyond a reasonable doubt, which give or takes 90%, force, fear, or coercion with a jury that's going to look up? And the defense is going to be, well, she wanted to stay with me. She could have left any time. The door was unlocked.
Yeah.
I mean, unless it's legitimately like a Taken movie,
Mm-hmm.
where there's padlocks and there's chains and they're chained to the wall, and there's some stuff happens like that. Like there's still cases out there like, oh my God, that's human trafficking. We've got to get it. We've got to yada, 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 yada. However, in a lot of these cases, well, the door was unlocked. She could have left anytime she wanted to.
Yeah.
There was prove I said I'll kill you if you leave. Prove it. Because that's what the defense attorney is going to say, which means most ADAs at any level really are not going to want to take this on because the conviction rate's not there.
Right.
Then you dive into something beyond that of now you're talking about normal sex crimes. And I hate to use the word normal because everybody looks at human trafficking, and the second you say trafficking, most people go back to like Taken or some movie that is just Hollywood.
Right. People being kidnapped at a truck stop and
and be forced and there's the thing about it is it's the same, should shock the conscience the same way as an uncle touching a niece or a nephew. It should happen the same way. It should shock the conscience to the point of, and I don't know, I'm not a proponent of the death penalty. I'm not, because something was said to me one day, and I think it's very, very true. You can't be pro-life in one aspect and not in the other. Either you're pro-life or you're not.
Maybe.
There's a lot, and it was a longer diatribe than just that. But you've got this moment of, so what do we do? How do we do this? How do we start going after the people who are touching our kids and our nieces and our nephews and our brothers and our sisters? And a lot of times you can see it's uncles, it's step parents, it's pastors, it's people that are supposed to be trusted. And now, well, it's just happened this one time, or it just happened over in this area of the country. No, this is nationwide.
Yeah.
This is worldwide.
Well, and in a lot of those cases where that does happen, the time that they're caught is not the first time.
No, it's never the first time. I don't believe there's ever been a person convicted of a sex crime where it was their first time doing it. I have lived too long and seen too much into that world and done too much research into that world. It's never the first time.
Right.
It's honestly probably the 10th or 11th or 12th time, because then they get comfortable and they make a mistake.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to say. The first couple of times, they're very careful about it because they don't want to get caught. After a while, it's like, well, I haven't been caught so far, so I don't need to worry about it as much.
And there's a story, I mean, it's from last year out of the New York Times. Or the first paragraph, it's images of child sex abuse have reached a crisis point on the internet, spreading at an unprecedented rates, in part because tech platforms and law enforcement agencies have failed to keep pace with the problem. But less is understood about the issue underlying it all. What drives people to sexually abuse children? Now, there's theories, and science is trying to go and figure it out. The problem becomes, the way this article ends up leaning into is it's how they're born. It's not a choice. You see what I mean? And if you can take some fringe movement on the outside of the world and be like, well, I was born this way. I honestly believe, and people are going to disagree with me all day long and they have in the right forever. I think you're born gay.
Well,
I don't think you're born and then, because the quote from Dr. Fred Berlin in here, the director of Johns Hopkins Sex and Gender Clinic, he said, no one chooses what arouses them. They discover it. No one grows up wanting to be a pedophile. Bullshit.
Well, to be brutally honest, I don't care about that argument anyway, because you may be born with that predisposition or not, but I don't care because that doesn't control you.
That's like saying you're born to be a murderer.
Well, that was an argument for a long time in criminal defense. People are born with certain genes that make them more aggressive or more violent. But I don't.
Serious?
I mean, there is actually a gene that they marked, and I don't know if it's true or not. I think it's MO8A.
That makes you more aggressive or violent.
Yeah, and that may or may not be true.
Now I really want to know if I have it.
But I don't care.
You still killed somebody.
Yeah.
You still raped a child.
That was still your choice.
But how do you stop it? Like, I understand. Okay, and I've got to go back and do the Keybase thing because I have it written all out of how to catch people.
Right.
Here becomes the problem. Then what?
Well,
because, and I'm not talking about everybody's, well, then you charge them, you put them in jail. Not if you don't have enough evidence for an ADA to take it.
Right.
Like, I've said this before. I've heard in my time as a cop solicit a minor.
Yeah.
With multiple witnesses and multiple recordings of it and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And the assistant district attorney said there wasn't enough there to prosecute. And nothing happened.
Mm-hmm.
Because there was a solicitation. There wasn't any action to the solicitation.
Right.
Okay, so we're just going to let this person keep going?
Well, the groups that I was involved with, and I didn't really participate much, I just kind of watched what was going on. On social media, these groups were basically propositioning trying to get a proposition out of one of these suspected pedophiles.
Yeah.
And they would, get this person's information, get their address, get their phone number, and then they would publish this information along with their conversation. So, I mean, they would publish it, and then they would call the authorities and say, hey, this is what happened. Are you going to do anything about it? And then a lot of times they would report their profile on the social media platform,
and I think there's another problem going. You reported on social media platforms. How many times does it get taken down?
Well, the really awkward part was on Instagram and on Facebook. You report their profile. Some of them had child pornography on their profile.
That's insane.
And you would report it, and you'd get a message back saying this doesn't violate our community standards.
That's insane.
And if you report it enough times, actually they would take your account down.
Because then you're harassing.
Yes. Harassing or bullying, which is ridiculous. But as far as, publishing their information, if it's all factual, I don't really see a problem with that.
If it's factual, you have child pornography on your fucking Facebook.
Yeah. Well, if you have propositioned somebody you believe to be a minor, I think that conversation is.
Because what was your intent?
Yeah, you should
exactly. What was your intent?
You should be able to publish that with their name and their information attached, if for no other reason than to warn other people.
Well, and now we've gotten to this problem in our society where we don't want to bully people.
Yeah.
Well, I understand. I was bullied.
Yeah, I would probably say that I was too. To some degree, I probably participated a little bit in that.
Oh, I mean, I was
and I
cop
regret
for
it.
a while, so my entire job was basically bullying society for money.
But to some degree, I think the whole anti-bullying movement may have.
You might have gone too far, because if you can't call out somebody has child pornography on their computer,
A predator.
or published on Facebook, like, they're not hiding.
Yeah.
This is.
They don't have to.
I said earlier that they hide well. They do, but they don't. I could type in 4 or 5 keywords, and I'm not going to tell you what they are, because the second they figure out people know their keywords, they change them.
Yeah.
And who knows, someday somewhere around the world, a guy who's infatuated with 9-year-old boys is going to hear this and be like, oh my God, I was using that keyword. Now I got to go change this and and that's the other problem with the dark web. The dark web is, we're privacy freaks, as crazy as it sounds.
Yeah.
You and I are privacy freaks. We don't feel comfortable with lots of people.
Right.
Granted, I do, but I don't.
Yeah.
Like, you're the total opposite of me, though.
Yeah.
Like, you don't want a room with 30 people all focused on you.
Yeah.
I'll take it for like 15 minutes. Because I'm always worried about somebody ulterior motives. I think that's always been my worry, and that always will be my worry.
Okay. I don't even want to be around two people.
But we're privacy freaks. We
Yeah.
don't necessarily want people to know where we live or what we do, or like it takes a lot to get a phone number out of us.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah.
That's why there's all these other apps that we end up using to like not necessarily hide what we're doing. Like, I don't care if you know what I'm looking up on YouTube. But at the same time, why is it any of your damn business what I'm looking up on YouTube?
Yeah.
But the problem was, a couple years ago, there was Tor, and it's still out there. It still exists. And 80% of the nodes are owned by the United States government.
Yeah.
So have fun with that.
Yeah, I don't use Tor for that reason.
But it was the common access way to the dark web.
Yeah.
The problem with Tor was 80% of nodes are owned by the United States government, and 80% of Tor is nothing but child pornography.
You think that's coincidence?
See, I don't know. There's no proof.
Right. I mean, there's no way to know.
There's no way to know. It's like, why do I want Maxwell to spill so bad? Because then you have proof.
Yeah.
Then you have proof. People have made up theories about elites being pedophiles for hundreds of years.
Yeah.
Hundreds of years. But the problem that nobody wants to look at is, at least in the common people, we have a child sex trafficking problem. We have a pedophilia problem. We have an issue with people being attracted to minors, and I'm not even saying pubescent minors. I just screwed that word up. Pubescent. Yeah, no, I didn't.
Pubescent.
Yeah. What did I say? Whatever.
I don't know.
But I'm not even talking about people being attracted to 13, 14, 15-year-olds. Yes, that's screwed up. That should not happen. A 25-year-old or a 35-year-old or a 45-year-old should never solicit a 14-year-old for sex or sexual favors or any way, shape, or form about it. Period. Period. I don't know how this is still a conversation. But that being said, we're talking about people who are sexually attracted to prepubescent humans.
Yeah.
Little boys, little girls. We're not.
People under the age of 9.
People under the age of 9. And they want to have a sexual relationship with them. And we have a problem in this country with it. I think that's pretty evident. If it's only 2% of the country.
That much?
We only there's some estimates that it's like 3%. Like, there's some massive, let me see if I can find it. I just saw it. I think it was this article that I saw it in, where it was, a majority of convicted offenders are men who prey on the ages of children 6 to 17, but women also commit hands-on offenses. Rough estimates put the rate of pedophilic attraction to 1 to 4% in both men and women. There you go. 1 to 4%. We have 330 million people in the United States.
That's a lot of pedophiles.
That's a lot of pedophiles. Rough estimates put the rate of pedophilic attraction at 1 to 4% in both men and women. Studies suggest that a small subset of male and female pedophiles have an interest in toddlers and or even infants. Now, I've got a toddler. You know what that makes me think every time I see somebody stare just a little bit? Or let's talk about Disney World. How many times has the FBI or somebody walked in there and walked out with half the freaking staff?
Well,
I mean, it wasn't legitimately half, but you know what? I know somebody that worked at Disney as a Disney princess.
Okay.
I'm halfway tempted to see if she'll come on.
Okay.
And she lives in town.
Okay.
Because we had a conversation one night about that. About people who was obvious that they were staring a little too long.
Right.
Or people who were taking pictures with nobody. Like,
right.
We had a whole conversation about that. I'm really wondering if she would come on. So.
Well, and to be fair, in places like Disney World or whatever, I mean, you've got a whole community that's based around serving the interests of entertainment of children.
Yes. So the problem becomes, if you are sexually attracted to children, it's where are you going to go?
Yeah.
Theme
There.
parks.
Yeah.
I mean, basically any theme park, but especially Disney, because Disney is more directed and pointed towards 13 and under. I'll put it. About it was if you could get the easier crimes, they'd let you get the easier crimes.
Right.
Like, oh, we need to stop drug trafficking right now.
Well, with drug trafficking, you have a funding issue as well as a publicity issue. You don't have that with.
The problem is drug trafficking can make people money.
Yeah.
Drug interdiction, civil asset forfeiture
Right.
can make people money. Saving kids and saving lives and making sure they don't get sexually abused doesn't make anybody any money.
Right. You can't sell those kids once you
And
pull them off the street.
And it's well. And the problem becomes you get this massive, I don't want to say lack of caring, but because there's no funding,
right,
there's no
pursuit.
There's no direct pursuit. Yes, we should stop that. Yes, we should do that. Yada, 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 yada. If it's obvious. If it's not obvious, well, what do you want us to do about it? Investigate it.
I mean, do something. But if there's no incentive, I mean, how do you incentivize that? How do you actually get law enforcement interested in pursuing pedophilia, child trafficking, any of that, when there's no money attached to it?
The other side of that I'm going to stick in here is, how do you deal with the mental health of the people that are willing to do it?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point.
Afterwards.
That's a really good point. I don't know.
Because we're talking about something totally that's going to leave you with scars.
Yeah. I mean, I've had to work with some of this stuff, and it's not, I didn't do that much of it. Like, it wasn't every day. It was like maybe a couple hours a week.
Well, and I know how I'm trying to think how old I was when I was sexually assaulted. I mean, I was sexually assaulted as an adult in a bar by another man.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been the last 4 years, 5 years. And I know how I felt after that.
Yeah.
I can imagine somebody going through that as a kid. And I've seen victims who went through it as a kid.
Yeah.
And it's one of those, you are entirely altering the course of their life.
Yeah.
It's rape and sexual assault changes people. And something, we can't let it keep being normalized. And I think that's what scares me, is I'm starting to see it normalized. Like, oh yeah, he had some pictures of some naked kids, but he didn't actually touch them. And I'm going to say this because most adults our age understand what sexting is. Most adults our age have honestly probably had images sexted to them. Actually, every girl that I can think of that I've talked to in the last 2 to 3 weeks has had a male send a picture of what they're packing.
Yeah.
To put it politely. So Facebook didn't get mad at me. Totally unsolicited, totally unwanted. And there was an epidemic a couple of years ago where if you had people would have your AirDrop open.
Yeah.
And they would on subways. And if a lady had her AirDrop open, people would walk on and they would send, I can't beat around this bush anymore. They would just start airdropping dick pics to people.
Yeah.
Like, it was an actual, like, that's still visual sexual assault. I don't care how you put it.
Yeah.
That's still an issue.
I mean, what's the difference between that and just dropping your pants right there in the middle of the subway?
Nothing, really.
Yeah.
But according to the guys of the law, there's a huge difference. One's intentional. One you can say is an accident. I don't know. And that story was out of London that I remember reading about. So we're such an over sexualized world. It's seeped down to our kids.
Yeah. So how do you fix that? I mean, how do you fix
But-
this problem?
But back to the rabbit hole I was going down. Oh, he just had pictures.
Yeah.
Most people, if they get a nude or quasi-nude image of somebody, maybe not immediately, but eventually, there's the thought that picture is being sent to be used.
Yeah.
That's the nicest, cleanest way I can put it. That picture, even adult to adult, is being sent with the intent on being used.
Right. Well, and that's still distribution of child pornography.
And the
people
problem
seem to be
is,
forgetting that.
yes, it is. But the problem is, there's a lot of people now. I mean, we're talking about 1 to 4% of the entire United States.
Yeah.
Where, well, I didn't touch them. I just got the pictures. Well, if somebody sends me a picture of them in lacy underwear, what is the intent? Seriously, think about it.
Yeah.
What is that? Like, yes, there's an art and a beauty to it. That being said, that's on a way deeper level than most humans start out at. So now we're at a point of, okay, what is the intent behind adult sexting? Oh yeah, it's to be used later. Let's establish that right now. So child pornography, what is the intent? To use it to make
Right.
in a sexually arousing personal session.
Yeah.
I'm running out of words to say masturbate. I really am. Because if you solicit a child, if you have pictures of a child, that is not, well, and this becomes a fine line too, because you and I grew up in the era of bathtub pictures.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's something that I don't always think about. I've had relatives that have had photos removed from social media because it was child pornography. It was just their kid, like after birth.
Yeah.
Just took a picture of the kid.
Well, and there was one like,
And babies don't come out with clothes on.
yeah,
Like,
no, I thought babies came out with Gucci. There's a joke in there that I'm not going to say today. But you've got to this point of going, a lot of times kids playing in the bathtub when they're young kids,
yeah.
they do some cute stuff, and it's just like, there was a picture my wife took of like my daughter running up to me one day. Well, like she wasn't in the bathtub, nothing.
Yeah.
And was going to post it on social, but Kennedy didn't have a shirt on.
Yeah.
And she was only like,
Which technically,
2.5, like it wasn't that long ago.
Yeah.
So this became to the point of going, well, yeah, it's a cute picture, but don't post it. Well, why not? Because it's child porn. And like this whole mindset of, she goes, oh my God, it is.
Yeah.
You post it on social, you can't see who saves your pictures on social media.
Yeah.
I've got 3,000 Facebook friends. How many of them? What's 1%, 1 to 4% of those 3,000? See what I mean?
Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah.
And the other side of it is, we've got to find a solution when we do catch them. And I don't know what it is. I don't.
The best solution that I've found so far that, I mean, reporting to the cops is one thing. I mean, I guess do that, but if they're not going to pursue it, the only solution that I've found really that's actually legal is just doxing. I mean, just publishing.
Public shaming.
Which
somebody's going to say, oh, that's bullying. That's this. No, it's not. It's protecting our kids.
Yeah.
We should do something in this country that I don't think we ever do. It always gets politicized when we say it. Protect the kids.
Yeah.
It's a hard world out here.
Well, and that should be the point of this in the first place.
Protect the kid. But somebody's going to politicize that and say, well, what about the kids without health care? Let's give them universal health care. And what about public education? And what about this? And what about the kids that are starving? And what about food stamps? And what?
Let's at least start with basic rights.
Let's start with the understanding that kids deserve to grow up and not be sexually uncomfortable and not be sexually assaulted and not be raped.
Kids have a right to privacy.
Kids have a right to privacy, and kids have a right to their private areas. and people will laugh at this. I take this to an entirely different extreme of like, I don't want my kids' diapers changed in public.
Yeah.
Unless it's absolutely like we don't go that far from home.
Right.
For that reason.
Right.
Well, I say home. We're living in a hotel room right now. But that's a lot of it too. Is I don't want the kids to have to get their diaper changed in public.
Yeah.
Because, and everybody's had to do it. The whole, if you have kids, you know this. You've had to do the whole. Well, I don't have a choice. I got to change it right now because there was an accident. But if you're changing it in the car and somebody walks by, that's part of that 1 to 4%. What? Because you know how easy it is to walk by and take a picture.
Yeah.
How simple it is, especially nowadays.
Yeah. To
walk by and take a high quality picture. Well, that turns into you don't know who's watching your kids. I don't like taking my kids into stores anymore. But at the same time, my kids have to be socially acceptable. So are socially adapted.
Yeah.
They have to know how to act around people. And that being said, it's 1 to 4%, which means there's 99 to 96% that aren't trying to sexually fantasize about my children or any children.
Right. Right.
But what scares you? The 1 to 4%.
Yeah, you're not worried about that 96%.
No, and it's just like Walmart. I mean, I don't know if it was this way when you were a kid, but when I was a kid, we'd walk into Walmart. My dad would be like, "All right," like we started out with walkie-talkies before cell phones.
Yeah.
Also, I was, "Keep it on. I'll call you when you're ready to leave," and I got to go run around Walmart.
Yeah.
You think I'm ever going to let my kids do that? Hell no. Hell no. And there's a lot of vigilante justice out there when it comes to pedophilia that I understand. But I can't, I'm not going to say never because somebody will catch me out one day. I do not condone or encourage vigilante justice because then you become a criminal too.
Right. Well, and at a certain point, you have to some degree, you have to let the law work before you just have to let the legal system work. And if it doesn't, I don't know what to tell you.
I don't either.
But I mean, I don't encourage vigilante justice either. The whole doxing and publishing thing, have at it. I mean, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, do it.
Well, okay. Immoral. As long as you're not doing anything immoral. Breathing's illegal.
True.
I don't have a, like, breathing's illegal.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? We live in a world where Joe Rogan, on a sidetrack down legal and illegal, we live in a world where Joe Rogan is moving from Los Angeles to Austin, Texas for a little bit more freedom.
I find it kind of entertaining that he's moving to Austin.
I do too, but I would move to Austin. Steph and I had that conversation today. What, you're saying you don't want to move to Austin?
I don't want to move to Austin.
North of Austin's pretty nice. Like, not Austin, but north of Austin.
Well, being outside of Austin is fine.
Yeah. Would I live in downtown Austin? No way.
I don't even like living in, like, the town that I'm in now.
Yeah, no, too many people.
Yeah.
The other thought we had was one day we'd move to Montana.
I could do that.
Yeah.
It's pretty country.
Yeah, it is. And it's not 110 in the summertime. I walked out.
Yeah.
But this is going to be part one. We're going to do part two in a couple hours. But we had to set some ground rules. Because to start talking about this pandemic, this epidemic of pedophilia in the United States and around the world, you have to understand there's ground rules.
Yeah.
Children have the right to body autonomy. Children have the right to privacy. Children have the right to grow up and have innocence last as long as it can. Children have the right to be safe. There's also another factor to this. 1 to 4% of estimates. Okay, estimated 1 to 4% of the United States has a sexual attraction to minors. On part 2 of this, we're going to go in depth into some stories and talk about real life incidents. So this was just the ground rules. This is just the intro. This is just the basics, because I have a passion in life to stop this somehow, some way. Whether it's through this or something I can do, I want to make sure that I've done the most I can the day I die to rescue kids who are in danger and adults. And that's my drive. My drive is to see the system fixed. But if you want to, well, what part specifically would you fix first? Taxes? No. This? No. There needs to be less laws, and there needs to be less police brutality, which is a hot topic going, oh my God, police brutality. There needs to be less people dragging a woman out of a car in front of her kids. But first and foremost, there needs to be the reassurance that you can go to a party, you can go to a club, you can go to kindergarten and not worry about your child being molested or raped. With that being said, this is part 1. Part 2 will be recorded tonight for those of you watching live on Facebook and Instagram, or Facebook and YouTube, sorry. Part 2 will be recorded tonight and be streamed tonight. And for those listening to the podcast, part 2 will be dropped the day after part 1 was. You're welcome.
Whenever that was.
So that being said, we're gonna stop this one here. We're gonna go collect our thoughts and make sure we have it the right way and make sure we can say it the right way. That way we do not unintentionally trigger those victims should they stumble on this one day. With that being said, this has been part 1 of the Pedo Pandemic. You can follow Lucas on the social media. Lucas?
Twitter. At the Lucas Cohen.
How do you spell your last name?
Cohagen.
Okay. You can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, and YouTube. And I missed one. I know you're smiling at me like I missed one somewhere.
I don't know. I can't keep track of your stuff.
At Greg Jingle, Jerry G, Jingle. And please like and subscribe to this podcast. Share it with your friends. And we will see you guys the next time. So I'm going to end this with a favorite phrase from my favorite music festival. The entire world, as we always do, live today, love tomorrow, and unite forever. Mahalo.